You're very welcome on the 4th of May. You'd be listening to this maybe on the 5th of May, but my goodness, it has been a lovely, beautiful start to the month of May. I just love it. I loved the gradual change of the year from the cold winter days of January. And I started off on my tour because I've been touring the country with the book All the Things Left Unsaid. Started with a podcast show in Waterford with Blind Boy. That was at the end of January. And for 16 weeks since, I have been up and down from Cork to Donegal. I've 4 more gigs left. Tomorrow night I'll be in Castleblaney, and then after that I go to Kerry, Sheemsa, next week. And then after that, Galway Town Hall, and ending in Glore in Ennis at the end of May. And that'll be me done for the summer. I'll take a rest for about 2 or 3 months, with the help of God. You know, I was in a pub recently when a man with a soft felt hat began singing a song about Drumshanbo. He was at the bar with his back to the end wall and a hat slung sideways on his head. His eyes were closed. It was an old familiar melody, with lyrics penned in the 19th century, ripe with ornate compliments and archaic musical embellishments, woven into a hymn of praise for the dainty little town in County Leitrim. The wounded soul finished his song and bowed his head, as other drinkers fell back into softly murmured intimacies. "That was awesome," a young American said, "and to think that we're actually in Drumshanbo." I've often wondered what makes the town so endearing. Maybe it's the summer school, when people play music along the streets. Maybe it's the choir resonating from the church on the hill, or the burning candles on the convent altar in winter mornings. Maybe it's the horses grazing on the slopes of the mountain, or the boats that moor at jetties on Acres Lake. Maybe it's the hush in the graveyard, where sleep the remains of 500 souls who perished during the famine. There are so many reasons for falling in love with any particular place. My father had a sentimental attachment to Cavan, but he was from elsewhere. An exile in an armchair, he would wind himself up with nostalgia for the Donnybrook of his childhood at the drop of a hat. He was fond of hats. He too wore a soft felt fedora and had a choice of 3 that rested on top of the wardrobe in his bedroom. A man without roots, whose shadow haunts me still. I morph into his long-faced double, and I only have to speak a sentence to hear his voice within me. I always hoped that eventually I could say I belonged somewhere. But my father's restlessness nestled in me for a long time, and I envied people who belonged anywhere. I remember when Charlie McGettigan and Paul Harrington won the Eurovision Song Contest and were brought back on stage to sing what was then the winning song, Rock and Roll Kids. And in their moment of victory, McGettigan proudly mentioned Drumshanbo. He was rooting himself not in the swirl of fame and glory, but in a place where he belonged. I once felt I belonged in Glangevlin, a mythic and beautiful region of West Cavan. I remember one morning A warm May morning, long, long ago, when two tractors met on a narrow road in front of me and stopped so that the drivers could greet one another. Engines were turned off. They didn't speak, but they sat in the saddles of their grey Ferguson tractors, savouring the exquisite absurdity of a lovely day and lighting 2 cigarettes from a single match. My car windscreen was red with the corpses of dead insects as I waited to get past the tractors. And with the window open, I could hear the hoarse croak of a cuckoo and remembered that I was lucky to be alive. There was a superstition that if you were looking at the ground when you heard the cuckoo for the first time, it would signify that you might be underground before he returned in another year. The superstition was a way of delighting in the nowness of being. I am wondrously alive in this moment, was the implication of all such pishogues. The first call of the cuckoo is mellow and sweet, and I always feel exhilarated in late April when I hear him as he swerves above Loch Allen and across the villages and townlands on the shoreline that make a necklace around the lake. Drumkieran, Dowra, Ballinaglara, and Cormungan. And even though he plunders other nests, I remain on his side. I forgive him and welcome him home. Because where else would he go? And why would he fly so far to get here, if not for the fact that he too needs to belong somewhere? The necklace of towns around Loch Allen is completed at the southern tip by Drumshanbo. It sits where the lake ends and the Shannon begins. And I am content there in any shaded pub, like the cuckoo must be content in his homecoming, though he cannot claim ownership of anything, not even a nest. The truth is that we can belong anywhere if we just give it a chance. And even now in old age, if I could sing, I would sing the praises of beautiful Drumshanbo. When I talk about belonging anywhere, I think about Rumi. Rumi tells a story about someone who gets up in his little cottage in the mountains and heads for the town, the village, and when he gets there he goes into the tavern and he has a great day of drinking and celebrating, of laughing and joking, and at some point someone asks him, "How will you get home?" And he says, "I don't know, but whoever took me here will take me home." Now, there may be many different ways to interpret Rumi, but for me that little nugget is something I cling to as a meaning of life, because you can live in 3 different ways. One way to live your life is full of anxiety, always wondering, are you in the right place? Always wondering, are you doing the right thing? Always wondering about yourself, constantly apologizing and feeling uneasy that in some way you are doing things that are wrong, that you're, in that sense, in the wrong place. And the other way to live your life, the second way, is to live it like with such affirmation, such confidence that you become almost aggressive. You become almost, ferocious in your conviction that you are right. It amazes me the amount of people I meet who kind of are clenched in their fists with the conviction that they are right. And also the amount of people that I meet who are limp in their whole body because they feel so apologetic for just being alive. And I like to think that the best pathway is to follow the middle ground. And the middle ground is to say, I'm neither right nor wrong, but in some sense, my surrender and my reliance on the Godhead, that's what gives me peace. That whatever happens ultimately in the will of God. I mean, you can say the will of the universe. You can say in the unfolding of time, this moment was meant to be. Because every moment is interconnected with every other moment. Every moment is in itself the ultimate revelation of the universe. So if you think about it in terms of personhood, if you think about the Godhead in terms of personhood, and maybe that's only a mythological way that we deal with it, yeah, sure, but at the same time, the urgency of what happens now is happening. And the wisdom of life is surrendering to it, surrendering to this moment, letting go in this moment, not worrying whether you're right, not being clench-fisted about being right, but not being apologetic about being wrong all the time in your life either. Actually living every moment as if it was given to you from beyond yourself, given to you in a way that you are surrendering to the truth that the universe is revealing itself in this moment. And that you are minded in this moment, that you are loved in this moment, that you are cared for. I think that's what Rumi meant. Whoever brought me here will bring me home. You know, I'm 70 years of age, and sometimes when I, do something new, like take on, let's say, an extra few gigs in a tour, and I think, am I able for this? Am I too old to be going around the country? Or when I agree to do some, television appearance, and I think, well, I'll have to drive down to Cork to do that. That's a long way. Should I be doing this at my age? And sometimes I'm checking into a hotel, and I become aware of my age. I become aware that, this was okay when I was 50. I'm checking into a hotel because I'm doing a television interview or a show the following day. But look, I'm 70. Why am I doing this? Why can't I just sit on the balcony, sit on the patio, and just take it easy, chill out, right? So I question myself, like maybe you do, like everybody does. We're always questioning ourselves. And then the other side of that is where you become too aggressively affirmative. So that if somebody said to me in the foyer as I'm checking in, Michael, there you are. What are you doing? I say, I'm doing a television thing tomorrow. And they say, oh, Jesus, are you still doing television things? At your age, would you not just rest yourself? And then I become aggressive. How dare you say that to me? So there's two extremes. It's like being apologetic for your life, or alternatively trying to defensively rationalize your life all the time to everybody. And really the middle way that I find of great consolation is just to live it like this was given by God. This was given by God. This moment, I'm speaking to you in this moment. I feel this moment was given by God. This moment is the revelation of the entire universe. Isn't that amazing? But it is really, even in physical terms, because as far as I know, and I don't know much about science, but I know that the scientists now say that, in a sense, everything has a causality, everything is linked. There's a sort of determinism in the cosmos that, the little butterfly's wings in one hemisphere in some way affects what happens in the other hemisphere. Everything is so completely interrelated. And in that sense, human actions that generate human consciousness may in themselves be the result of other things. We may not even be as free as we thought in how we live our lives. And maybe our only freedom is surrender. Surrendering not to a tyrannical God. I know that you'll hear that on the internet. You'll hear lots of atheists with clenched fists telling you how appalling and offensive it is to have religious belief. But honest to God, all I'm saying about religious belief is that it's consoling, that it gives me joy. And it's not clenched fisted, it's not ideological, it's like living in the present moment all the time, because the present moment is something I acknowledge is given to me by God. That's my religion, and that fits for me into Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jew, any religious expression. I can sit within it, inside it, and say yes to the tenets of that religion, and say, yes, I believe. I surrender to this moment and believe that there is a threshold in my own consciousness. There's some sort of depth to this consciousness which is actually beyond my own ego. The constitution of me as an individual is just the surface wave on the ocean. The ocean within me expressing itself in this transient consciousness called me, the deep ocean of being, I surrender to because I'm a result of how that's moving forward in this moment. And Rumi puts this beautifully when he says that whoever took me here will bring me home. And when I try to do things, when I risk things at my age, at 70, and I take on some work, or maybe I take on to do a new book, and I think, I've done enough books, now it's time to retire. It's time to sit on the patio. And then I think, well, look, I'll do it. I feel silly doing it, but I feel, well, I'm surrendering to the moment. Like God is... It's just God is the depth of all being. So I'm expressing myself. But I'm not controlling the moment, really. I'm not controlling the moment. I'm living the moment in response to the fact I am awake to the moment. When people talk about meditation, always notice that your consciousness has two levels. It has this kind of a split level that you're always able to be aware of yourself. You're always able to, you have a little corner of your brain or your mind which is watching the rest of your mind. So when you have negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative feelings, when you have positive, enthusiastic, hysterically, high emotional levels of attachment to beautiful things, you can become aware of them. You can be actually aware of what you're thinking. The flow, like a river, flowing through all the time of ideas and thoughts and feelings. And you're actually like there sitting on the bank of the river, observing everything. It's quite amazing. It's quite beautiful, really. Even if you're Even if your feelings are very negative and you're low or depressed, there's a way whereby watching them can become calming because you're able to just distance yourself from them by being aware of them. And the same goes for those positive attachments when you get overexcited about the fact that you have a new dress or a new car or a new companion, and you're so attached and you're so possessed by this feeling of joy. And yet, that kind of being possessed by joy can exhaust you as well and leave you too attached, and you can't sleep because you're thinking of your new Toyota or something. But if you become aware of it, if you become aware because your mind works like that, it's not that you're doing something unnatural. Your mind actually does have this facility to be aware of your thoughts. So when you do it, you become aware of your attachments, the things you cling to, your obsessional thoughts flowing through about your new car or your new dress, or alternatively negative thoughts. When you become aware, you become released. And that's an amazing facility. And if you go deeper in that, in meditation, you'll find that there's a level that I call a threshold in your conscious mind. It's almost like, do you know the talk about the black hole, and then they talk about the kind of cusp, the verge of the black hole, beyond which you cannot see, and yet it's there. I always feel that inside me is this sense of a threshold. It's like I can just look across the ledge. And I know there's someone there. I know that the deepest sense of being in me is in there, inside of me. And I become aware of it. It's like I'm at a moment of meditation and calmness, calm abiding. And I call this experience an encounter with God. I call it an encounter with otherness. I call it an encounter with the beloved. And it's amazing that if you take this with you into ordinary life, then the anxieties about, are you in the right place? Are you doing the right thing in your life? They fall away because you realize, well, I'm not alone here. There's some sense of a bigger presence moving and revealing through history. I'm simply surrendering to this moment. Now, you can't do that if you're possessed. If you're really possessed by either negative emotions like hatred and wanting to be violent to other people, but even if you're possessed by what you think are positive emotions like, I have the truth, I will do the truth, this is the truth. Either way, you're not surrendering. So the righteous, when you hear people who are righteous within religion or outside religion, you're listening to people who are possessed. They're possessed by the truth, and the whole construct of the way they're looking at the world is just a terrible mistake. All you can do is surrender. When you surrender to the truth, you don't surrender to the idea of truth or to your view of the truth. You can only surrender at a level of the heart, at a level of the inner self, at a level that that knows not what you surrender to, that knows that what you surrender to is beyond all names for God, all ideas about religion. To surrender is to go beyond yourself. St. John of the Cross said, I go out from myself on a dark and obscure night. I leave myself alone as I go out into the dark night. Go out. You surrender. And it's not a frightening experience, it's quite the opposite. Because what you're saying is that you don't really have to worry. You don't have to worry about anything. Think about the birds. Think about how they are clothed. Even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like these beautiful birds. And yet they live from day to day. There's another lovely story in the Gospels. You know, it's where, I think St. Peter, I'm not sure, and he's in the boat. Now it's after Easter, so these guys have gone home and started their careers again. He's gone fishing because he's a fisherman. He's on a big water. He's in his boat. And one day he sees Jesus, the risen Christ. Jesus, the risen Christ. Not the historical companion and friend he had known and who was crucified and died. This is he that was that Jesus, come now transformed as Christ. And here's the detail in this story. He comes towards the boat, walking on the water, and Peter gets out of the boat and walks towards him. And Peter is able to walk on the water without any problem until he notices that he's walking on water. He takes his eyes off Jesus, focuses on himself, and begins to sink. Isn't that amazing? I mean, the complexity of that story is beautiful. His confidence went when he started thinking about himself. The prize was to be reunited with this transformed and glorified Jesus who had become the Christ, now walking towards him on the water. And he goes towards him, and he can walk on the water, except for a second he stops and thinks, oh my God, I'm walking on the water. And then he sinks. That story to me allows me again to focus in my faith on the mentor deity. The mentor deity for me as a Christian would be Christ. But it's also Buddha. You know, I do practice prayerfully in the Buddhist Tibetan tradition. I revere mentor deities like particularly Shenrezig and Manjushri and Amitabha. These are Buddhas in the Tibetan sense, mythical, figurative representations of ultimate reality, fully manifest in the lineage of various lamas and teachers. And so the Panchen Utral Rinpoche, who lives in Jampaling and Cavan, my revered teacher, I see in him the full brightness of Amitabha Buddha. I don't see the two in conflict. I don't see Christianity and Buddhism in conflict. And perhaps I see that the mixing of both with reverence for the tradition, mainstream, not using kind of, let's say, idiosyncratic new teachers who have new ideas or new ways of interpreting the old tradition. No, I always would say to people, if you want to go to the well, go to the well, go to the source, go to the real mainstream of the fresh water in anything. And that's mainstream, whether Judaism, Christianity, whatever. Go to the source as the mainstream, and you'll find that it's full of wisdom and liberation. So that's what I find when I use a mentor deity as a focus in a prayerful way. It's not that I'm doing something that has a literal truth to it. It's not that I'm attaching myself to an ideology. It's simply that I'm doing something like a mental tai chi, if you like. It's like a mental yoga. I'm stretching my mind in a particular way with this particular image, this mentor deity, and I'm doing it in order to affect or condition how I live in the present moment. So if I live in the present moment like just as an ordinary human being who is secular, modern, conscious, then I live with a strange sense of alienation from everything around me, a strange sense of unease about not knowing, and sometimes trying to be too affirmative, too clench-fisted about where I'm right. Or maybe I'm too apologetic about, where I'm always wrong, which would be fair enough. But if I live with the mentor deity, if I choose the Buddha or the Christian deity or Mary, I choose, or a saint, I choose somebody. It's allowing me to live each moment in a sort of a feeling of surrender. It's a lovely feeling, it kind of mirrors a baby in its mother's arms. It mirrors it. It's, of course, literally that's not what I'm talking about. But metaphorically it is. In the month of May, I especially think like this. I especially look at the green foliage and the growth, this beautiful, wondrous new year coming at us. And I think of it like something deliciously maternal, like the gentle mother embracing me as I walk around in the garden, as I walk on the streets. It's just a beautiful experience to be alive and to feel mothered. And to feel that also that you can access that delicious feeling of motherhood even if you had hard times in your own life. You might have had a mother who wasn't loving, who wasn't caring. You might have all sorts of different complex histories where growing up was traumatic. But this is a kind of, it's a more simple idea, but it's a deeper idea. And it's based not on the past, not on your history, but on here and now. It's based on really just being here, be here now, in this moment. You use the mentor deity, you create a shape, you create a sense of trust, surrender. I've seen people do it even with somebody they loved who had passed away. Where somebody who has been bereaved and they lost their companion, their husband or their wife, their child or their parent, and for years afterwards, they use that parent as a mentor deity. I've met people who have lost a close friend or a companion, and they speak to that close friend or companion every day, every minute of the day. They continue a relationship with them. The lover that they lost is with them all the time, they'll tell you, guiding them all the time. And that too, I think, is a mentor deity, a way whereby You're thinking about somebody in a metaphysical sense. You're thinking about somebody transcendent, somebody who is, if you like, beyond this universe. But you're thinking of them as having a benevolent relationship with you, a relationship with you that blesses you, that loves you, that cares for you, that brings you some deep, transcendent aspect of being. So science might say that, well, perhaps all consciousness is the result of brain function, a kind of, sweat that arises, or a fog that comes out, a heat that comes out of brain function. And there's no way to ever prove one or the other on that, There's no way to prove there's no God, or there's no way to prove there is a God. But I think you're moving into a fundamentally new and fresh way of thinking about this if you consider that developing a relationship with the mentor deity, with the God, with the Christ, with the Buddha, with Mary, is a way of being present in the present moment. It is a way of surrendering now to the beauty and the blessedness of this moment. And for some reason, our brains seem to be wired in a way that's compatible with that activity, where we can come to touch and feel the sensate world around us, while also exactly at the same moment getting a sense that there's something deeper underneath the surface reality. And feeling that deeper reality is one with us. We belong in this. We belong in this embrace, if you like. I think poetry is always about the embrace of love. I don't know, do we write much poetry anymore in modern Western culture? Or maybe we write a new kind of poetry, a poetry that sounds like it's political ranting. But there will always be poets. And poets will always write, I think, about the embrace of love. And finding the embrace of love, not just in literal terms with, the partner that you share your life with, but living this embrace of love with the world around you. I live in a rural area now, and I have, I've wild roses outside the door. I'm looking at them as I speak, and they haven't blossomed yet. They won't until July, but they're all green and lush now. The bare, what were bare branches all winter, they're all just so much rich with greenness. I find that I can experience this embrace in the rustic, rural world that I live in. But I'd be very, very quick to say that I also experience it when I go into the city, when I go to the town. When I go to the town and I see the flow of people, you see, to me, when I'm in the market square of some lovely little town and I'm sitting there having a coffee at a table in the open air in spring or in summer, and I'm looking at all the people flowing around me, I'm seeing them the same as I would see seagulls on the beach, or cormorants on the rocks at the ocean. These are lovely animals. This too is nature. Nature expresses itself in the rhythms of human beings on the platforms waiting for trains. These are as beautiful flamencos. So the urban area is no different in its wonderfully organic animal life. It's no different than rural Ireland, where I'm sitting looking at birds and bees and spiders. And everything embraces me. Everything holds me. And there again is the threshold. You begin your meditation, you're trying to hold the universe which is around you, which you're conscious of. You're observing it. You're observing it on the outside and on the inside. You're observing your emotions on the inside. You're observing the wind and the sound and the texture of everything on the outside. You're holding the universe. The threshold is when you begin to feel that you've actually let go and the universe is holding you. The universe is holding you. God is holding you in this moment. Oh, this is such a precious, precious moment. Such a wonderful moment when you finally see that you've let go and you can feel, sense that on the surface level, on the level of all the sensate world around you, there's this presence, there's this feeling of something deeper coming through, and that it is holding you in this moment. Relax, they say in I think kind of Indian culture, relax in alaya. Relax into that great big ocean of being. Relax into it. I used to go for a swim sometimes 30 years ago, and I'd swim at Inishcrone, and I would go into the ocean and I would lie on my back and I would say to myself, relax in alaya. And I would float there in the blue sea with the blue sky above me. I would float and feel the wave, the slow, gentle wave, the undulation, the rising of it, and then you'd be going down, up and down with the sea. And I would feel it physically, like literally, like I am in this ocean. I am in this big salty water, and it's holding me up. And I would feel that literally true, but I would also feel it metaphorically. I would feel that it was a metaphor for my whole life. I'm floating in the embrace of a great mother. I'm not here because I generated myself. I am not a self-made man. I did not make myself. I was made. I am just like the wave. The wave is nothing. It is the ocean expressing itself. And I am nothing but the ocean expressing itself. Why wouldn't I surrender to it? Well, look, thank you so much for being here, for sharing, listening to what is a riff of joy, a riff of happiness. I was looking back on this little moment where I saw a guy singing a song about Drumshanbo. And I thought about how alienated we can feel and how disconnected we can feel. Me, my father, how all the time there's ways that we are kind of separated from the world around us. And I thought, I once belonged, and I do belong. And whoever took me here will take me home. And they'll take home the cuckoo. And they will take home the rose tree and the leaf, the spider and the bee, all will be taken home. All are just waves of being, surface waves of existential colour that we can perceive. And they and we are just all the one single thing, the one single surface expression of being. And being embraces us like a mother. When I say to you, thank you for being here, it's like your being is the ocean inside the wave, and that you are here is a gift to me, because you bring with you the entire ocean. The entire history of the cosmos fulfills itself in you in this moment. And when you turn off this podcast, whatever you turn yourself to in the next few moments, whatever person's face you see, whatever you hear, wherever you walk, you're experiencing the threshold beyond which something comes back to you. Being here. Being here is always you surrendering to the beloved. Always the great mother embraces you when you are here. Being here is something that will continue when you stop listening to this. You will continue to be present. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.